Welcome to the Monday Monologue. So today I'm going to talk about a couple of different things. First part of the video, we're going to focus on the whole 300B thing. And initially this year I was planning and still going to be doing a 300B amplifier and add it to my production line of stuff that we're building. And initially I was going to do a really high-end model only that used like all ISO tango iron. It's going to have a really nice, fancy wood chassis with a, nice powder-coated engraved top plate and just, really top shelf everything. And it's probably going to end up being $5,000, $5,500 without tubes. And had several people call me this year asking about a 300B amp. And once I mentioned that price point, they weren't interested. And I can't say I blame them. This year, probably fiscally for a lot of people, it's going to be tight, or they're kind of watching their pennies right now, unsure where this whole economy's going. Don't want to get into that again, but I think that's just the reality that, especially folks on a fixed income, they're watching the stock market, or their investments at least kind of flatline, if not going down a little bit with a kind of uncertain future. Now's not the time to go spending a bunch of money. And so they're looking for other options. And so I sat down and started thinking about, okay, what could we do to bring a 300B amp to the market at kind of a bottom level price point? Like, how cheap can we go and still have a decent sounding amp? Now, I will preface this with, this probably isn't the amp to buy if you're planning on putting $1,000 EML tubes in it and get the best that you can get out of those tubes. But on the flip side, why would you buy a $5,000 amp and then put $200 tubes in them that aren't getting the best of the amplifier? So I think this is going to be more of kind of tiptoeing into this market with a product that's designed for use with something like PSV 300B tubes, or not that those are bad tubes, but just they're on the lower end of the price spectrum, or JJs, and or the Shugi 300B-Z tubes that I really like, which they're not like at the same level as those EML tubes, but they're 1/5 the price. And people have to be realistic about what they can afford. And I don't want to be left out of that market and have them going off and buying something else when I could hit at around the same price point. So one of the things that I was thinking about is the expense of this amplifier is mostly the iron. That custom, ISO power transformer is expensive. Those output transformers, a pair of them are $1,000, and you can't get around that. And I can't just absorb that cost. And so I think there's a way to do it at this other price point, at least to get people in the door on this direct heated triode kind of sound. So one of the key things is Hammond makes power transformers called a 302AX, and it's designed for a 300B amp. And it has all the windings and all the voltages you need. And there's Dolly, my pal in crime here. It has all the voltages that I need to do an amplifier. Now, it doesn't have the windings that would allow me to build it exactly like my personal one. But let me go into here the changes to the schematic that are needed to make this work. So looking this over, the main place I see with some cost savings is in the power supply. And the amp I'm using now has got basically two mono blocks in the same chassis. We've got this split rail power supply that, like, here's the transformer here, the high voltage, goes through the rectifier tube, has this 33 UF Solene first cap that both channels share. Then it goes through a 10 Henry choke. And then after the choke has a 100 UF cap. And then the channel splits. And each channel has its own additional choke and a 250 UF cap supplying filtration for both channels. Or for each channel, I should say. And what I'm thinking about doing is keep it the same up to this 33 UF cap. Possibly use like a 5 Henry choke here. I'll have to look at the cost difference between the two different chokes. And then instead of having this split rail power supply with a second choke, use like a 50 ohm power resistor. So we'd have a capacitor, choke, capacitor, resistor, and capacitor, and then the B+. And that would eliminate two chokes, one of these big caps, and just simplify the power supply, which I don't think there's going to be a huge sonic detriment doing that, especially it being a single-ended amp. This stuff would have to all stay the same. The other thing that we could do is have a non-regulated power supply. So we would have the Hammond transformer. I can't remember the model number. I'll put it up here in the description. But it's a 1-unit power transformer, where all of this is in one transformer. But instead of having 7 volts AC that's needed to get the headroom for these regulators to operate, and then we'd have bridge rectifier, this nice big cap afterwards, we're probably going to end up with a little over 5 volts DC. And so in this leg we'd have like a dropping resistor and then another cap, and then just go out to the tubes and eliminate this LT1085 with these tantalum caps that are required, and that'll save some fabrication work and just simplify the power supply. And then mainly we don't need these two separate 7 volt AC transformers, or even this combo one, which I'm not using this combo one. I'm using a pair of individual transformers in my amp that I'm listening to. And so all of this would get combined into one transformer, which is going to save some money and fabrication time of not having to figure out how to mount these extra transformers and all that kind of stuff. And then the other thing that I could do is in the schematic itself, this potentiometer is really not needed. With the DC heaters, I put it in when I built mine because I wasn't sure, but it ends up being in the middle or close to it, just all the time, because there's no real noise coming out of the DC heaters. So this could get replaced with a couple of like 51 ohm resistors that are matched, and that would work fine. So we could eliminate having to mount this pot and the cost of it, but there's really not anywhere else to really save some money in here that's going to amount to anything. And so, I'm not going to change this coupling cap. I think that would be a detriment to the sound. And this cap I'm already using a Solene cap because it's not in the signal path, so we're not spending a lot of money there. The other thing we could save a little money on is not using an audio note cap here, but again, I don't know. This isn't a super expensive cap either, and I know that sounds good. So there's not a lot of money to save here. I think the money saving can be done here. And so between that and using a powder coated steel chassis and selling this thing, without tubes or something like that, we probably can hit a price point that people would be interested in buying one of these for. So you can see there's some changes that would be necessary to make this work at this price point using this transformer and some of these other parts. But in doing so, we're going to be able to get under the wire of a price point that people can afford. And I haven't built a 300B amp with these 15 watt EdCore output transformers. And they're going to be part of the key. I may be using those musical power supply ones. I can try them out too, and maybe talk to them about, is there a possibility of, winding something that's a little better for a 300B amp, but these little 15 watt EdCores really do sound good. And for what they cost, they are a good value for the money spent. I will have to try a 5K versus a 3.5K. I've got both here, so I can demo both of them. I may do one channel one the other, that we can run the suite on them and see which one is actually better at this particular application, and then listen to it. Because if it doesn't sound good, I'm just not going to sell it. We'll figure something else out. And obviously, at another point in time, I can revisit doing this higher end one. But I think for now, it makes sense to try to build something like this. Build it on one of those black powder coated Hammond chassis. And, just try to do everything on as much of a budget as I can while still maintaining the quality. Going to use the Mundorf coupling caps. I'm going to, even though I was just talking about, I still think it's worth spending a little money and putting the audio note cathode bypass caps on the 300B tubes. I do think that the base model will be sold with no volume control, just as a power amp, because a lot of you guys have preamps. Just have that as like the base option, and also sell it with no tubes. And you can buy your own tubes. You can decide how much money you want to spend on whether you want to use new old stock, whether you want to use those Russian 6S and 7 style tubes, whether you want to use PSV new old stock or whatever. And then on the 300B tubes, you could buy some used ones. You may already have some out of another amp, and you're like, I didn't like the way my A50 sounded, and I've got the tubes from that. I'm just going to reuse those, at least to start with. And it lets you upgrade as you have the money to do so. And then later on, you get some nice tubes, and you're like, you know what, I think this amp's kind of holding it back. Then there will be an option to spend some money on a nicer amp. And so I haven't sat down and calculated up the price, where it's going to be. But I hate to even say anything. But I think I could probably hit like maybe a $2,000 price point with no tubes. I have to sit down and do the math. I don't remember how much this transformer is and that sort of thing. But anyway, let me know in the comments what you think of that. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying, yeah, do the fancy one. We want to see that, or build monoblocks and all. But people aren't buying that stuff. I mean, I've been trying to sell those KT 120 monoblocks since I built them, and nobody's bit on them. And they have to go for $3,000 a piece, because that's with those oak chassis and all that stuff. It has a lot of high-end parts in it. That's just what they're going to cost. And nobody wants to spend that. And like I said, nobody's, ponying up to to get some fancy 300B amp with really nice iron and stuff, at least not right now. And so I think this is going to be a fun avenue to kind of head down and see what we can do on a true budget 300B amp. So that's going to be something I'm going to be working on soon. I feel like that's a good path, and I've actually got a customer who's interested if I can hit a price point that they think they can swing. So recently I had some trigger thumb surgery. It's healing up. I get my stitches out on Thursday. This weekend I felt like good enough to start working on some projects I was behind on. I got this ST70 rebuilt for customer. They'd originally called up just wanting to buy one of my little headphone adapter boxes, which I don't have any of those built, but I could whip one up for somebody. And the more we started talking, he's got an ST70, but it didn't have a volume control on it. And I talked through how, you can't just run this amp wide open and try to control the volume on the backside. That's not going to work. And so he sent it to me to get a volume control, but then looking at the amp, it had the original ST70 style driver board with the 7199 tubes, and the traces were all lifting, and their broken stuff, it was a mess. And so he was like, you can't even buy those tubes anymore. I'm like, right. And so I did the 312 AU7 conversion from Tubes for Hi-Fi. It's really great kit. Put that together. Got this finished up this weekend, and this thing sounds great. I need to give him a phone call and tell him it's ready, and then I need to build him a little headphone adapter box. I may do a video series on an updated version of that headphone adapter box, because I'm going to build one for him and for me, because I've now got some headphones, and I haven't been listening to them much because none of my amps have headphone jacks. And so, got that going on. I do want to do some tube rolling in my ST70. I haven't really spent a lot of time with it. Anyway, we'll talk about that in another video. I do have a music selection for the week, and I had my streaming music playing in my car while I was on a trip last week for some city business, which is another thing I'm trying to kind of wrap up all of that stuff. Anyway, this song came on that was like, wow, that's cool. So I looked up the song and then got off at the next rest stop and pulled it up on Amazon, see if it was for sale, and it is a Blue Note reissue. And so I ordered it, and it's insanely good. And it's Cannonball Adderley with, let's see, it's got, who will perform with this? Miles Davis and Hank Jones. Let's see who else is on this thing. Sam Jones and Art Blakely. And this is just, man, it's good. It's such a high quality pressing, or a re-release, or whatever you want to call it. The music's great, really great performance. You can tell these guys are just jiving together, and highly recommend getting a copy of this. So, something else. Take a listen to that. So, that's my music selection for the week. I did order the MoFi Santana Abraxas. I got high hopes that they get it right. The last, audiophile 180 gram edition I got of it, it's pretty sad. So many of them sound really muffled. And one of the viewers sent me an early pressing of the original, and unfortunately it's not in excellent condition, but it sounds way better than that 180 gram pressing. But I'm hoping MoFi did a good job. Just fingers crossed. And I'll report on that later. So anyway, I think that's going to wrap it up. Thanks to all you Patreon supporters. Thanks to you folks that otherwise support the channel with donations, or they have joined my little YouTube membership. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate folks that I appreciate all you subscribers and people that regularly watch the channel, and folks that tune in every week to watch the Monday Monologue. I really appreciate you guys. I do hope to, now my hand's healing, get my stitches out, got my other health issues behind me, that get back to doing some projects. We want to finish up that little noob sound thing. I got the 6C33C that I want to get finished up, but we're also going to be working on this 300B project and getting that kick-started. So stay tuned, and we will see you next week for the Monday Monologue.